Okay, this is the patch 25.6 notes rundown, and we can see here that there's going to be nerfs to Caitlyn, Corki, Darius, Draven, Ezreal, Garen, Jinx, Karma, Yorick, and buffs to Jarvan, Jhin, Kai'Sa, Kha'Zix, Lilia, Lucian, Poppy, Smolder, Twisted Fate, Xin Zhao, and they've adjusted Fiora, Gwen, Master Yi, Naafiri, and Singed, as well as some system changes to Otacon, bounties, lane swaps, Cyrilda's Grudge, and Warmog's Armor. So this is probably quite a large patch. Let's see. Vanguard LP refunds and new ban notification. Cheaters suck, and encountering one in-game has been widely quantified by scientists as a 1-star experience. Okay, so what they're going to do is a cheater was detected in a match played on 2025-03, so like it'll tell you from a previous match that cheater's account has been banned, and any LP lost as a result of this match has been refunded plus 22 LP. Wonderful. Is this retroactive, or is this just starting now? Starting with 25.06, we'll be offering a remedy for the former, and if Vanguard determines that a player lost a ranked game due to an active cheater, we'll be refunding the LP lost as a result of that game once the cheater is suspended. When a refund happens, you'll receive a notification immediately on your next login telling you when the match occurred, how much LP you've been credited, and identifying an updated rank. Interesting. We won't be removing LP from those that inadvertently won with a cheater on their team, only restoring it to those who lost. However, any account that's found intentionally and repeatedly queuing with cheaters, also known as hitchhiking or bussing, will be banned right alongside them. Wow. There are some problems with this. As per usual, people will celebrate. There are some problems. Number one, let's say that you're duoing with someone and your friend happens to be cheating. Now, there aren't very many people cheating in League, so I wouldn't say this is a problem. But, like, I'm pretty sure I know a guy who was cheating in CSGO, like a friend of a friend who we played with sometimes. If I was banned in CSGO because I had been playing with somebody who was cheating and I didn't know whether they were cheating or not, that seems excessive, especially when I'm like not playing with them most of the time. Like I played a few games with this person. Like that would seem very, very bad. So I would worry about, unless you're playing like 80 or 90% of your games, like clearly just perma duo with this person. If you're someone who happens to duo with someone who's cheating, I mean, there's even people who find random duos on like the League Discord and stuff like that, play with the guy for a while. If you do that and you get banned just because you played, it would depend on what the threshold is here. If you played like, 5 games in a row with this person and you get banned, I think that that's crazy, honestly. The other issue with this is people are going to say that this sounds really nice, right? That you're gaining all this LP back. But there are a couple of implications that are kind of crazy because of this. Number one, if you just randomly get LP back, like this is going to cause a lot of inflation because they're not taking the LP away from people who didn't lose. So Riot does this all the time where people don't like not getting LP. So they give people free LP all the time. And as a result of giving people free LP all the time, people are shocked when then they get into these states where they're losing more LP than they win in their ranked games. Well, the reason why you lose more LP than you win in your ranked games is because you lost at 0 LP a bunch, or without getting demoted. And so that was bad for your MMR, and your MMR went down, but your rank stayed the same without you losing any LP. Or, for example, this system would implement that. You lost a game, it still lowered your MMR, but you're gaining all of this LP back, and both teams are now getting the LP from the game. So you're just going to create a lot of LP inflation, which will inevitably lead to more accounts stuck in a negative win-loss, well, not win-loss state, but like a negative state of LP gains, let's say. So that's another issue with that. But of course, you wouldn't want to randomly take away LP for people who, you know, inadvertently had one game where they played with somebody who lost. That would be ridiculous. So I just don't know that you should be compensating people who lost these games by giving them LP back. The other thing I'll say is that, but maybe it's okay. Maybe it won't cause too much inflation. I mean, cheaters are pretty rare in League. How is this going to affect high elo? Like, let's say you're competing for the last spot in Challenger, or you make it to GM by 1 LP on the last day. What happens if a cheater gets banned at the last minute and all of a sudden somebody unexpectedly gains a bunch of LP? Like, that's kind of ridiculous, no? If all of a sudden the threshold changes or somebody makes it over someone else because a cheater got banned like at the wrong time, that just seems a little bit strange, right? Like, what is the timing going to be like in regards to high elo and who's getting into what spot? So that seems a little bit strange as well, but it's fine. Champion Mastery. In this patch, we're releasing our new Champion Mastery icons. We've made updates based on request from all of you to bring the emotes we introduced last year more in line with the previous version. Just revert it back to the previous version. It was so nice, while still giving them a fresh new look. Waste of time. As a heads up, we're still making some final tweaks to the color, texture, and audio of the emotes based on PBE feedback, so expect those to come through next patch. For now, though, enjoy showing off your hard-earned mastery and style. Your shop is returning this patch as promised. Okay, now for the first changes. So Caitlyn, her W trap, headshot damage increased versus trapped targets from 40 to 220 to 35 to 215. And from 35% bonus AD, from 40% bonus AD to 30% bonus AD. So she's losing 5 across the board flat. And then she's also losing 10% of her bonus AD. So that's quite a bit of damage decrease there on the Ws. And I think that that's kind of sad because this is like the most skilled part of Caitlyn's kit. So I think punishing the players who are the most skilled at the champion feels a little bit bad compared to just punishing like everyone. It just seems like a odd thing to target because like Caitlyn traps is such an important like high level skill on the champion. They're also reducing her R damage from 300 to 700 to 300 to 650. So she's losing 25 damage at rank 2 and 50 damage at rank 3. This actually kind of matters a little bit because it's, you know, it's a finisher that, you know, often is going to either kill somebody or come really close to killing somebody. So maybe it's not that big of a deal. I mean, it doesn't change at all at rank 1, which you're going to have most of the time. Most schemes you're not getting to level 16. So, you know, this one doesn't matter as much. And the damage amount matters less the later you are anyways, right? 50 damage matters a lot less 40 minutes into the game than it does 10 minutes into the game. And 25 damage here is not that big. So it's not like the end of the world or anything like that, but it definitely feels a little bit bad. I also don't really think Caitlyn needed nerfed, but they say she's really strong right now, so okay. I haven't seen a Caitlyn in a long time, I'll be honest. Corki, base armor 30 to 27. They're saying Corki is doing really well. I am not seeing Corki doing really well either. I mean, the stats probably don't lie, right? I'm sure if we go and we take a look, although we're probably on the current patch. No, it's still on the old one. Let's take a look. Like, Caitlyn's got a negative win rate and is the third most picked AD carry. Corki has like a slightly positive win rate, but he's not being picked a ton. Yeah, I don't really think either of these champions need a nerf, but that's just me. Darius passive hemorrhage. Monster damage modifier from 300% to 200%. Okay, so this was a big one because obviously Darius Jungle was the most busted thing on the patch. So this champion has nearly a 50% ban rate. So that's a problem. We'll see how much this does. I really don't know how much his clear speed is just because of his passive damage. I assume that it's probably a lot. So we'll see how much this does. I'm not really sure. Draven no longer gains 2 bonus adoration stacks for every 6 kills. I didn't even know this was a thing. So what does it mean by he gains 2 bonus adoration stacks for every 6 kills? Like, is it like at 6 kills when he kills a minion, he gets like an extra 2 stacks every time, and at 12 kills he gets an extra 4 stacks every time? Or is this just like he gets 2 stacks? Because like that's nothing. So I'm kind of confused how this even works, because I really didn't even know what this was. I don't think it's going to change a whole lot, though. Like 6 and 12 kills is a lot. It really depends, though, on whether this is just a one-time 2 bonus stacks or whether this is like consistently like meaning a ton of stacks for him. But to be honest, if he's already 6 kills into the game, by the time this even activates, he's probably already taking over the game or in a good spot in the first place. So I really don't think this is going to change a whole lot. Again, did Draven really need nerfed? Who's playing Draven? Apparently he's the highest ban rate, but the reason why he's got such a high ban rate is because people don't like dealing with him in lane because he's like a lane bully. But like if we look at him, he's right here next to Corki. He's like barely positive win rate, like pretty low pick rate. They're like the 16th and 15th most played AD carries. I really don't think either of these champions needed nerfed, but maybe this is a light nerf. Ezreal armor growth from 4.7 to 4.2. Ezreal's been doing all right, but I don't know that he needs nerfed. He's sitting at a 48% win rate, and we're nerfing. I mean, this is not a huge nerf. So again, like they're going light here, but that is... What are we even doing on this patch, by the way? So I agree with the Darius nerf, and I think that they may have gone a little bit light on it, if anything. That's the only change I've agreed with so far. Uh-oh, we're not off to a good start. Fiora Q mana cost from 20 to 40 to 20 at all ranks. That's fine. I mean, that's a very small change. Fiora is a very high skill champion that's not picked a lot right now and not doing very well. So I feel like this is totally fine. It's just a small change. I mean, look, it's going to be 20 mana at rank 1 anyways, and then you're getting like 5 off here, 10 off here. But it adds up a lot in lane. So I think that this could, maybe this actually even ends up being a bigger change than I think because she spams this so much in lane. But I don't know that Fiora has like severe mana problems anyways. So when you're just talking about mana, I don't really know how much this helps, but maybe it helps a lot. I mean, it's certainly, she's in a position she could use a buff, so that's fine. E damage on critical strikes decreased. So his E did 175% damage when he crit, but now it's down to 150%. How's Garen doing? I mean, he is the most picked top laner, but he's sitting literally right at a 50% win rate, so I don't really know that that's a problem either. That's fine. Gwen, all abilities adjusted. Okay, here we go. Health growth down 100, or not down 100, down from 115 to 100. So down 15. Base health from 620 to 650, so that's up 30. This is probably... Okay, so that's a net nerf by like level 2. It's even. And level 3, it's a nerf. 1,000 cuts. 1% to 1% plus 0.6% per 100 AP to down to 0.55% per 100 AP. But that's not a huge nerf. Only 0.05% of target's maximum HP off there. and the damage to monsters modifier is going from 10 to 5. It's really not that bad. I don't think that's the end of the world yet. Her final snip damage is going from 60 to 160 to 70 to 170, so it's getting buffed. And her maximum damage is going from 110 to 310 to 120 to 320, so it's obviously just also gaining the extra 10 maximum damage. So, okay. W Hallowed Mist bonus resistances 22 to 30 plus 7% AP to 25 plus 5% AP. So this is also going to be a buff early and a nerf later. E Skip and Slash cooldown 13 to 11 to 12 to 8. Cooldown refund from 25% to 65% to 50% at all ranks. So this is a massive buff early because her cooldown's way down and she's getting 50% right at rank 1 on her E instead of it way later on. And I would assume she wouldn't max. Actually, I don't know what Gwen max is second. What is Gwen max? Q then E. Okay, so she does max E second. That kind of makes sense. Her W wouldn't be. So there's a lot going on here. I think that so far I'd say that the changes are kind of neutral. On hit damage 15 to 12 to 20. So that's nerfed early but buffed later on. It's just these changes are just all over the place. Let's see what they said. Gwen was originally intended to be a lightly scaling AP fighter, and her kit's design and strengths reflect that. However, over time she shifted towards late game scaling, and she's been closer in power curve shape to a hyperscaler like Kayle, as opposed to a lightly scaling fighter like Fiora. We believe that the best version of Gwen is one where her Q stacking gameplay and E-dash are actually powerful and fun tools to work with in the laning phase, and potentially even in the jungle. But today she tends to play to scale and win teamfights with only needlework cast. We still want players to be able to take over games as Gwen by using her entire kit rather than farming up a bunch of gold and throwing ultimate needles. So, and then the big change is probably coming to her ult. Damage per needle from 35 to 95 to 30 to 90, and then 10% AP to 8% AP. So she's losing 5 damage per needle, and she's also losing 2% AP damage per needle. And then the initial slow is actually going up from 40 to 60%, straight to 60% right away. And then reduced slow. Oh, so there's an initial slow and then a reduced slow later on. The reduced slow is going from 15% to 25% at all ranks. I'm going to be honest. I think that these changes are really strange. I guess they're saying they're adjusting her, right? These don't seem like a nerf. The only thing that I might be missing here is if the damage to monsters modifier on her passive, depending on how often she uses this getting cut in half, the base damage on it might be a little bit rough for her clear. And if that really hits her clear in some way, then that could be quite bad. But for the most part, like, if we just go through it and look, like, she's getting a little bit less tanky, but she's actually buffed before, like she's buffed very early, like level 1 and level 2. But, that falls off very quickly. But even then, it's not that big of a fall off. It's like after that, then it becomes, 15 HP, minus 15 HP from level 3 to 18 per level. And then, she's losing a little bit of passive damage to monsters, but nothing significant. And as far as I understand. And then her Q is actually getting a decent chunk of extra damage, which is really important. And her E's cooldown is way, way, way shorter. And she's getting way bigger cooldown refund. And the on-hit damage is nerfed a little bit very early, but then like is going to be much better later. So didn't they say they were trying to make her less of a scaler? They were trying to make her like a light scaler, but then all these changes here are making her better at scaling. And then her W, she's not going to put points into anyways until her third maxed ability. So this is going from 22 to 25 for a very long period of time before she gets to put a second point in her last maxed ability. And so this is actually going to be a buff for quite a while. And then it's losing 2% AP here on the resistances, but it's just the resistances part, which is not that huge compared to the rest of the ability anyways. And, so you're not going to feel less on this until you're like 150 AP or like putting a second point into your last maxed ability. So that would be, I forget what level that would be. I never get that high level on support to put a second point in a third ability. Let's see. So you would be like, you're level 9 when you max your first ability. You've got, I think by that point, you've got 2 points into your second ability, right? Let me think. Challenger player, by the way. Okay, so let's just run through this because I need to learn this for myself. So obviously, level 1 through 6. No, you can put all your points. So you'd say 3 points in Q, 1 point in W, 1 point in E, 1 point in ult. So then after level 6, the question is, can you put another point into Q? Or do you have to put a point? You can definitely put a point into Q. So that would be level 7, you can put 4 points into Q. Level 8 is weird. Okay, so I was right. Level 8 is weird because if you could put your 5th point into Q at level 8, then you would be maxing your first ability by level 8, but you can't. You have to put a second point into another ability. So at level 8, you would have 2 points in E on Gwen, for example. And then at level 9, you max out your Q. So then at level 10, you would put a third point into your E. And then at level 11, you put a second point into your ult. And then at level 12, you put the 4th point into your E. And then at level 13, you put the 5th point into your E. So it's not until level 15 that you would be putting this second point into your last maxed ability. So, level 15 is pretty late. So her W is really not nerfed. You're going to get to 150 AP before you get to that. So your W is really not nerfed until like you're level 15 or 150 AP. Her Q is buffed, right? Her passive is like tiny bit nerfed and her clear is a tiny bit nerfed. She's losing a little bit of HP level 3 and onward, but not a ton. And she actually has a little bit more HP level 1 and level 2. And then her E cooldown is massively reduced. Her refund on the E cooldown is massively increased. The on-hit damage is going to be increased as soon as she gets 3 points into E, which, here we go again. It's going to come at like somewhere around like level 12 or something like that. Or no, earlier than that. Maybe even level 10. No. Level 12. Surely. GG. My brain's fried already with this patch. Okay, so, it seems like a buff. And then, like, she's losing only a tiny amount of damage. How many needles does Gwen ult have? It's got to be only, like, 4 or 5 or something like that, right? Again, I don't even know. I think it's probably, like, 4, like, old Irelia ult or something like that. Maybe it's more. I don't know. But we should probably look it up. Okay, we're learning right now. Let's see. This is the wrong wiki. Can be recast twice more. Let's see. She launches a needle. It can be recast twice more within 6 seconds. Each subsequent cast refreshes the duration and increases the number of needles launched by 2. What? Okay, no wonder I don't know. How many ults can Gwen cast? 3 times. 5. Okay, the AI is wrong. What? I still don't understand. I read the whole thing. Let me try to read it again. So she launches 1. That's 1. She can recast it twice within 6 seconds. So that's 3. The activation at no additional cost with a 1-second static cooldown between cast. Each subsequent cast, refreshes the duration. But increases the number of needles launched by 2. I'm really confused. Okay, hold on. Let me think if I got this correct. So she launches a first missile, her first needle. Then she launches... Right. Okay, that's why there's pictures here. Then she relaunches it. What it's doing is it's 3 casts, but the second cast is launching 3, and the third cast is launching 5 needles. So when we look at the number of damage reduced here, it's 5. So on the first one, she'd be losing 5 damage plus 2% AP. So she'd be losing 2 damage if she has 100 AP, right? 4 damage if she has 200 AP. But she'd also be losing that damage times 3 on the second cast and times 5 on the third cast. Okay, I'm glad I looked into this because obviously, since I didn't expect her to be able to cast a total of 3 needles, 5 needles, 1 needle would be 9 needles. I didn't expect that to be how that worked because in my mind I was like, oh, she shoots the thing like 3 or 4 times or something like that. So she's losing a lot more damage on her ult from these small nerfs than I thought. So that makes sense because the rest of the changes were very positive. I think this is a rather neutral adjustment because she is losing a significant amount of damage on her ult, which is exactly what Riot wanted to do here, which makes sense because they're giving her a lot of power on her E and her Q, but taking away a lot of power from her ult. Although her slow on her ult is very big, that is very important, but I do think these changes probably overall are pretty neutral, and it does accomplish what Riot wanted to do, which is she's going to focus more on using her ult to slow and then Eing at people and snipping them with Q rather than hitting them with ult over and over again. Jarvan Q, 80 damage to 240 to 90 to 210. So this is actually going up early, but then decrease later on. Oh, no, it's not. It's just up 10 at all ranks. And then from 140% bonus AD to 145% bonus AD, this is a really good positive change for Jarvan. I'm kind of surprised because I don't think Jarvan's that bad, but I don't think a lot of people play him right now. Yeah, Jarvan was sitting at a positive win rate anyways, and was actually already the 10th most played jungler in the game. So I'm a little bit surprised that they buffed him at all. It's not a huge buff, but it is pretty significant actually. That is a really nice change for Jarvan. I don't know that he needed buffed. Jhin passive scaling increased. Bonus AD 4 to 44% to 4 to 44%. Plus 0.3 per 1% critical strike chance to 0.35% per 1% critical strike chance bonus attacks. Plus 20. I'm trying to figure out what we're even reading. Okay, so he gains bonus AD. What are we talking about? Bonus AD 4 to 44% based on level. So he gains bonus AD equal to 4 to 44% based on level, plus some based on his crit chance, and some AD based on his bonus attack speed. I didn't even know that this was a thing. So again, this patch is really exposing me here. Bonus AD. So he gains 4 to 44% bonus AD, and he's going from 0.3% per 1% critical strike chance to 0.35% per 1% critical strike chance. So he's getting a little bit more bonus AD based on his critical strike chance. And he's also getting from 0.25% to 0.3%. So he's also getting a little bit more bonus AD if he has more bonus attack speed. So this is also a really nice buff to Jhin, who I also don't think is in that bad of a spot. Apparently his win rate is actually not doing too hot, but he's being picked quite frequently. One of the dangers here is like Jin's a very popular champion. People enjoy playing him quite a lot. So the question here is he actually good and his pick rate is high because he's good and the win rate's low because a lot of people who don't really play him are picking him and learning him? Or is the champion actually just really popular and his win rate is low because he's needs a buff? That's the difficulty here. But this is not a crazy buff at all. And so this is a very light buff, which I think is okay if he's sitting at a 49% win rate. Jinx. Jinx is doing really well. Okay, so they're nerfing her ult from 325 to 625 to 300 to 600. So they just took 25 damage off of her ult at all ranks. That is not going to do almost anything to Jinx. Kai'Sa. It's like, there are very few times where Jinx is going to ult somebody and only kill them by, an extra 25 damage. And it's going to be even less than that, right? Because when you factor in somebody's resistances, if they have, normal just 40, 50 resistances or whatever, so like if somebody has 100 resistances, all of the sudden, this isn't even talking about 25 damage. We're talking about like 13 damage. So if you're only overkilling somebody by 13 damage, like that's so rare with Jinx ult that it's going to be like very rarely affecting a kill ever. And so it's, maybe not even once a game is this going to affect a kill, right? So how many, what is this going to do to her win rate when we're talking about taking a kill away from Jinx once every 10 or 100 games or something like that? Like barely anything. Kai'Sa, base armor from 25 to 27, base health regen from 3.5 to 4, and R cooldown from 130 to 70 to 120 to 60. That is some really nice changes for Kai'Sa. Let's see how she's doing. She really needs it. Kai'Sa is one of these champions as well, who's like, I think, a super popular, fun AD carry to play and is in a pretty bad spot right now. Karma Q base damage decreased. The problem here is that, like, what I will say is that I said these were nice changes because I'm glad Kai'Sa is getting buffed. These changes are not enough to help her, though, because when we think about like what's holding back Kai'Sa, it's not her base armor, it's not her health regen, and it's not her ult cooldown being 10 seconds shorter. The problem with Kai'Sa is she needs more of what she's actually good at, more of what impacts her kit, which is like her passive damage, her Q damage, things like that. Like, you're not going to use Kai'Sa ult off of cooldown every single time to take advantage of the 10-second shorter cooldown. And a little bit of base armor and health regen can help her against some longer range AD carries in lane, but it's not going to change a whole lot about like the dynamic of actually fighting anyone. Karma Q base damage decreased. Yeah, Karma has been running absolutely rampant, and as a Braum player, it's a bit of a problem. Apparently, and I don't really know why, all of a sudden we went from playing a lot of engaged supports to playing Lulu, Nami, and Karma nonstop, and their pick rates are really crazy. And Braum is also getting banned more than ever before, and I'm not really sure why. I'm not gonna lie. I don't think he's that good. Okay, so we're seeing some slight damage decrease to Karma Q. That helps a little bit, but it's not anything crazy. It's just 10 damage. Kha'Zix's passive and E damage increased. He's not in the best spot right now. I think that's very true. Yeah, Yeah, you could use a little love. Bonus AD 14 to 116 to 17 to 136. So he's gaining, 3 early on and then much more later on. And from 40% bonus AD to 50% bonus AD. So his passive damage is going way, way, way up later on. Don't know that later on is where he needs the most help, though, with this. It's probably better if he got this earlier. And then his E leap is going from 20% bonus AD to 40% bonus AD. That's pretty decent. Like, that's a huge increase in the AD ratio. But the thing is that, like, this is still a surprisingly low AD ratio in the first place, especially when Kha'Zix doesn't even always hit his E, right? Like, I'm not surprised if most of the time Kha'Zix is not hitting his E on his target. A lot of times he's like, especially when he's ganking early, he's like not going to be able to E right on top of his target. He's usually, just Eing in there to get closer. So I don't know. Not a huge buff, but a little bit of love to a champion that needs it. Lilia E cooldown decreased, scaling increased. So her E cooldown went from 14 to 12, and her damage went from 60 to 160 to 60 to 160. So the cooldown's just down by 2 seconds on her E, and then her AP ratio on her E went up by 10% from 50% to 60%. How's Lilia doing? I think I'm blind or something. Oh, here she is. Yeah, so she needed a little bit of help as well. Lucian E cooldown decreased. Yeah, Lucian's another champion that could use a little bit of a buff. I'm glad that they're doing a large patch like this with a lot of little changes. There's a lot of champions that just fly under the radar for a really long time. And, they're just like sitting at a, unplayable state or like a slightly bad state for a really long time, and they're just forgotten about forever. So it's good to take a pass through the game and actually like update a bunch of champions. So his E cooldown's getting decreased by quite a significant amount. It's going from 19 to 14 to 16 to 14. So that is a much, much shorter cooldown on his E. I wonder if this changes his maxing too, because I think you max E second on Lucian. And this significantly reduces the amount of cooldown you shave off by maxing it to only half of a second per point. So I wonder if it's still worth it to max E, or whether this gives Lucian more damage as well by opening up like a W max second. So this is kind of an interesting change. But yeah, 3 second cooldown on his E at rank 1 is going to help him a lot in the early game to be able to do stuff. Master Yi, armor growth decreased, Q critical strike damage increased. What? I think he's doing really well right now. I was going to say, so why are we increasing his damage on his Q? Master Yi has several built-in on-demand defensive options, meaning the times where he's attackable, he should probably be more vulnerable at a base stat level. We're targeting his armor growth to make sure these periods of vulnerability are more clearly weak points for him. But he's only losing half of an armor per level. So let's say that he's like level 9. He's losing 4.5 armor. That's going to make like barely any difference to the amount of damage that he's taking. And yet you're giving him an extra 25% like critical strike damage when he crits with his Q. That seems like a bigger buff than this is a nerf. So why are we buffing Yi when he's sitting at a 52% win rate and being way overpicked? And this is like a champion that doesn't really have the abilities, right, to be played normally, especially at high ranks anyways. So the fact that he's getting picked and doing well is even crazier, because he's not a particularly good champion to begin with for like doing a whole lot in jungle in high elo. So this seems a little bit crazy. I would say that this is a buff to Yi, which is not good. Oh god, here we go. Another crazy change here. Oops. To Naafiri. Mid-scope update. So they're just like basically reworking her a little bit. Naafiri was released as a simple to play mid lane assassin, but since then has struggled to find an audience. In retrospect, that target was not the ideal version of Naafiri, so we're going back to add some depth and outplay potential to her kit. Oh no, I just made a video where I recommended that people played Naafiri if they wanted to play an assassin mid lane because she was meant to be an easy to play assassin in mid lane. And now she's not anymore. To do this, we're swapping her W and R. They've been adjusted to account for their new places in her kit. In addition, casting Call of the Pack now makes Naafiri untargetable, making it useful as a situational damage ability tool or to hold for an outplay. Last note, given her pack-based theme, felt like a good opportunity to bump up the presence of her dagger dogs. She'll passively get more of them running around with her as the game progresses, and Call of the Pack now provides a non-ultimate way to refresh her pack on demand. So her base stats, her health growth is going way down, so she'll be less healthy. Her armor growth is going down, so she'll have less armor as well. But her base attack damage is going up, and her AD growth is going down, but only by 0.1. So this is already targeted at making her like less easy to play by making her less tanky and more of a true assassin that has to do a good job with very squishy health pool, but a little bit more damage. And then her passive max pack mates is going from 2 to 3 at levels 1 to 9 to 2 to 5 at levels 1, 9, 12, and 15. So she can scale a little bit better with more dogs. Her packmate damage is going from 12 to 32 to 10 to 20. So that's a significant nerf, especially early on, since she'll have the exact same number of dogs all the way until level 12. So this is just a huge nerf to her dog damage. And then 5% bonus AD to 4% bonus AD. So she's also losing bonus AD damage on the dogs as well. The packmate's health growth is going from 16 to 13, so they also have less health. And the packmate armor and magic resist is also going down from 2 to 1.8, so they also have less armor. Their reduced AoE damage taken is going from 76 to 50% to 76 to 55%. So but it's levels 1 through 14 to level 1 through 15. So they're adding a little bit of extra scaling on the reduction of AoE damage her dogs take. That's like really situational. Packmate reduced damage from towers is going up to 50%, so she'll be better at diving. Who's the real monster? Packmates now deal 165% damage to monsters, so this is going to, hopefully they're enabling her to jungle. And her packmate taunt duration is also going down from 3 seconds to 2 seconds. So far she's just heavily nerfed. Q Darkened Daggers, damage to minions is going from 60% to 80%, but that doesn't do anything. W Call of the Pack, Lost in the Pack, Naafiri and her packmates gain 1 second of untargetability on cast, so that's new. Bonus AD 5 to 25 to 20% AD, which is now granted on cast, but she also used to gain 8 to 24% AD as well. So the bonus AD she gets is way down, but that makes sense because it's not an ult ability anymore. Her extra packmates is just going to be at 2. The buff duration is only going to last for 5 seconds instead of 15 seconds. The bonus movement speed is 70 to 100% to 20 to 30%, so that's a lot less for 5 seconds instead of 4 seconds. This is also now granted on cast. Her cooldown is going from obviously the ultimate cooldown to 20 to 18 second cooldown. And the mana cost is going from 100 to 60 because it's not an ult anymore. And Call of the Pack no longer grants Naafiri a shield, a pulse of vision, and will no longer reset the ability's buffs on takedown. Pack mates will no longer gain bonus health and cooldown. So far it's hard to say, right, because we're going to get into the ult here. But obviously this ability had to be heavily nerfed to move it from being the ult to the basic ability. So it's hard to say yet. But so far everything is big nerf. So let's see the buff on her ult, because obviously this ability can get a lot stronger now that it's moving to an ultimate. So let's see if this can make up for all of those nerfs. Teaching an old dog new tricks. If Naafiri scores a takedown within 7 seconds, she reveals nearby enemies and can recast this ability once. The second cast grants her 100 to 200 plus 1.5 bonus AD shield for 3 seconds. Okay. Cooldown 22 to 14 to 110 to 80. The mana cost is going from 70 to 30 to 100. And the range is going from 700 to 940 to just 900. And the damage is going from 30 to 190 to 150 to 350. Plus 80% bonus AD is now 120% bonus AD, and it's still plus 10% per pack mate. You can run. This ability is no longer blockable. That's pretty important, right? So if you didn't know, with Naafiri's W, when she, channeled her thing and she went like this and then her dogs all pounced on you, you could block that for people by just standing in front of it. And now that's not possible anymore. I wonder if Braum E enables you to block it. Probably not. It's because it's not a projectile, or at least it shouldn't be, because she's the projectile. Big dogs only. It'd be like Braum E blocking a Vi ult because Vi is moving through you or something like that. It's just not how it works. Big dogs only. This ability can no longer be cast on minions. Honestly, I still think it's a nerf, but it's really hard to tell when they switch the ultimate and the W ability like this, because it's such a massive change to the way the champion works. But I'm just seeing a lot of negatives on the ult as well, right? Like, obviously, because it's an ult, the cooldown has to go way up. The mana cost has to go way up. The range was actually nerfed later on, which is quite bad. That it's losing some range, especially because it's an ult, right? Like, I don't see why this couldn't have just been 940 range right away. And then the damage, obviously the damage is going to go up, but the damage is a little bit deceptive because it's not a ton of damage for an assassin's ult. 150 damage at rank 1, 250 damage at rank 2. It's not very much damage. And what you have to keep in mind is that the reason why the damage went up is because this is now an ult, right, instead of her W. So the one positive for the ult so far is that the damage went, way up, but it's not really way up because, in fact, your W, like at level, well, I don't know if she maxed W first. I would assume maybe not. Most champions don't max W first, but I mean, like even here, like 190 versus 150, this would probably be later into the game when it was her W. But I mean, you're even seeing like in some cases a reduction in damage on her on this compared to when it was a basic ability. Obviously, it should be more most of the time. But even then, it's like, it's not a lot of damage. She's also still seeing the same 10% damage per pack mate. The bonus AD is up by 40%. So that's a little bit nice. But again, that extra damage is just because it's being upgraded to her ult. It being no longer blockable is nice, but especially at lower ranks, who was blocking it anyways? And like, it better be non-blockable if it's her ult. And it can no longer be cast on minions, so you can't accidentally cast it on a minion or use it to farm. I really just don't see, because the only positives here for her ult is that it does a little bit more damage. But of course it does a little bit more damage. It costs way more mana and is on a massive cooldown, and it's her ult. So when we look at her, her W, and this seems way worse, and her ult is just a little bit of extra damage, but barely any better. And she saw, massive reductions to, her base stats and stuff like that, making her a lot less tanky. I would not be surprised if she actually does a lot worse. The other thing is the champion will do a lot worse, like any champion after a rework, because people have to relearn how the champion works a little bit. So, obviously the win rate will go down, but like my prediction or my guess would be that this is not going to be that good even once people learn it. So this is not looking too hot. Poppy Q damage to monsters increased. Also, I'll just say one last thing too, is I think that there was a spot in the game for like an easier to play introductory assassin. I think that assassin is a class that a lot of people would love to play in League and like the concept of, but it's a little bit hard to get into because all the champions are so difficult to play. So I think that Naafiri being a champion like that was good. I think that maybe the issue is that if you want to play an assassin, I don't know that a like wild beast dog is the type of champion that you would think of when you want to play an assassin. When you think of an assassin, you want to play, and I know these champions already exist, right? But like you want to play like Zed, you want to play like if you're playing an assassin, you want to be like a ninja. Usually it's like an assassin is a person. So I think maybe that thematically Naafiri was just not a good champion to choose to be an easy assassin because she doesn't really fit the theme of being an assassin. Like you would expect Naafiri to be more of like a fighter or bruiser because she's like a beast, like a Warwick or something like that, than you would expect her to be an assassin. So I don't know. Maybe thematically that's just why she didn't get very popular, even though she was the easy to play assassin. I think maybe a human easy to play assassin would be much more popular. Okay, Poppy Q damage to monsters increased, so they're trying to help Poppy jungle, maybe get her out of support. So 50 to 170 to 75 to 195, that's pretty significant increase to her cap against monsters on her Q. And then maximum monster damage is 80 to 300 to 105 to 325, so that's a significant increase as well. Problem is that I don't think that this is going to help Poppy's clear speed very much in the jungle. So, and I don't think very many people like playing Poppy in the jungle. It's something that like high elo players will play because Poppy's quite a good champion and can provide a lot of utility and a lot of counters to certain champions like Zac. But I don't think that there are people who want to main Poppy jungle. Like obviously there are people out there who want to main everything, but there aren't a lot of Poppy jungle mains out there like clamoring to get the champion back in the jungle. So I don't know that this is all very necessary. If she's still strong in support, which I haven't even seen a lot of Poppy support, where is it? But if she's still doing really well or overperforming in support, she seems fine in support. Like people stop picking her, stop banning her, and her win rate's fine. So like, if you need to get her out of support, nerf something related to support. But Singed, base attack speed increased. That makes a lot of sense. Q now steals kills from allied minions. E scaling decreased. Interesting. So his base attack speed is going from 0.625 to 0.7. It's the equivalent of gaining 12% attack speed at level 1. Oh, that's actually kind of nice for farming. And they're mostly talking about farming here. Q Poison Trail. If a minion would die to another minion while affected by Poison Trail, Singe gets the kill credit instead. So that makes Singe way easier because rather than there being a timing to it, you just get all of the minions automatically. It just makes him amazing at CSing. Like he's, especially like bad Singe players are just instantly going to gain a lot of CS. So this is like a huge change. Because imagine if this change read like Singed gains 200 gold or something like that per game, or Singed gains 300 gold per game. That would be like just a crazy change, right? So this is actually really huge, especially the lower rank you go and the worse people were at getting the CS anyways. E Fling, damage 50 to 90 to 50 to 90, and 6 to 8% of the target's maximum HP to 6 to 8% of the target's maximum HP, and then 60% AP to 55% AP. So he's losing 5 damage per 100 AP on his E. That doesn't do anything. His E already does quite a bit of damage, and if he's flinging you, you're probably screwed. So I don't think, and he's not like he's building full AP Singed either. Like, he has some magic damage, sure, but Singed is one of those champions that's going to float around like 100 to like 300 AP max. He's never going to, lose more than 15 damage on an E because of this change. He's not getting 800, 900 AP. So Smolder, a lot of ability changes here as well. W Achu glob damage 30 to 110 to 60 to 100. So this is going to be gaining a lot of damage early on and then losing a tiny bit of damage later, but that's not a problem, especially for a champion like Smolder. His W, I will also note too, I believe is like, so this is the slow ball, snot ball thing that he rolls out. People were going at one point that with Arcane Comet, and it was quite powerful to help Smolder get through the laning phase and be able to scale up. So this is kind of interesting because him gaining like double the damage on that right away is pretty big, and could actually like do a lot for him in lane. And so that's kind of interesting. And then 30 to 110 on the explosion damage to 10 to 110. Oh, but he's losing a bunch of damage on the explosion. Maybe not. And then 60% bonus AD to 65% bonus AD. Meh. Okay. And then his E flap damage per bolt is going from 5 to 25 to 10 to 30. And then from 25% AD to 30% AD. So this is a little bit nice, but most of the time you're running away, you're not really doing any damage with these bolts anyways, and they do so little damage, even with this buff, that it's kind of like laughable. And then his R is going from 120 second cooldown to 100 second, or 120 to 100 second cooldown. Again, like, so all the way up until you're level 11 and putting that second point in ult, it's literally just the same. Then at level 11, you get your second point in ult, and it goes down by 10 seconds. At that point in the game, you're not like spamming your ult off of cooldown ever really on Smolder unless you're using it to clear waves and farm. So I feel like, like if you're going to get dove or something, sometimes you use this to clear, but this is not all the way until level 11. So at that point you're holding it for fights. So this is just doing nothing. So it's a tiny, tiny buff for Smolder. But I would assume Smolder's in like the trash can right now, so he probably needs more than a tiny buff. Does anybody even play him anymore? I don't even see him on here. Oh, here he is. Tier 5, 48% win rate. He needed more than a small buff, and this is a small buff. Twisted Fate base armor increased. 21 to 24. Okay, that does very little. How's TF doing? Yeah, I mean, he's another champion that's sitting about a 49% win rate, so it's probably fine that he gets a little bit of buff. Again, I think that it's better than them doing nothing, but it's kind of a funny little change, Xin Zhao Q damage increase. This is insane. Xin Zhao's doing really well right now. Let's take a look. Yeah, Xin Zhao's sitting at nearly 52% win rate, and we're buffing his Q damage from 16 to 68 to 20 to 80. GG. Xin Zhao hasn't been keeping up with keeping up with other junglers, making him less appealing to other AD fighters. So we're giving him a small boost to get him back in the game. That's crazy. Yeah, that was a mistake. He will be broken next patch. Yorick E damage to monsters decreased. 300 capped monster health damage to 70 to 210. So that really hurts Yorick jungle. I'm sure Yorick jungle is not super popular, but it was definitely... Let's see, where is it here? I don't see it at all. Oh, here it is. Yeah, I mean, it's doing well. It's not super popular, but I've seen Yorick Jungle and I do think it's strong. So this is probably fine. This almost sounds like it's a lot of monster damage off though, so I wonder if this is even okay. This like might be like this might pull him out of the jungle entirely. Okay, on to items. Cyrilda's Grudge, 30% armor penetration to 35% armor penetration, and 20 ability haste to 15 ability haste. This is a great change for AD carries. Oh, I guess it's for assassins. This is a great change for anyone who builds Cyrilda's. You're gonna really like this change. So that's really nice, and I think it being better is totally good. Warmogs, gold cost from 3,300 to 300 or 3,100, so it's getting 200 off. Gain Warmog's vitality, gain bonus health equal to 10% of bonus health from items. Gain bonus health equal to 12% of bonus health from items. What is this? So back in the first patch of the year, they added Warmog's Vitality that gives you bonus health equal to 10% bonus health from items. But they also increased the activation from 1,500 bonus health to 2,000 bonus health. I'm going to have to retest this. I don't remember them adding this, gain 10% bonus health, because obviously if you had 1,500 bonus health, right, then 10% of this would only be 150. So that wouldn't quite get you to the 2,000 if you were at 1,500 already. But this gets you kind of closer to that 2,000 earlier than you would expect. So I might have to do some experimenting with this because I really miss Warmogs. So that's interesting. And then the cost is also down 200. Honestly, this is probably a reasonable change. It's still not possible to build this first on support, even with this being at 12% instead of 10%. And the gold cost going down helps, but if you can't get the passive to activate, it's probably pretty bad. So it's still not going to be able to be built first on support or anything like that. But obviously for champions that do like Warmogs, this makes it a lot more attractive because you're going to gain that 2% bonus health from items, and the item's going to cost 200 gold less. So this is a really nice change. Because I think they overdid it with the nerfs to Warmogs. This is a really nice change to make it more viable for top laners and stuff like that might enjoy building it, while still keeping it reasonable and preventing it from being built on support and stuff like that. Okay, anti-lane swaps. So I kind of regret that we didn't talk a lot about this when it was implemented, but I have a huge problem with the lane swap mechanic, so we'll probably get into that here. When we implemented our anti-lane swap changes last patch, we wanted to affect regular play as little as possible. Yeah, that didn't happen. While also removing lane swaps from First Stand. First Stand is the first international event of the year that they were doing in pro play. We're tuning the system to further reduce the impact on regular play by alleviating the frequency and severity of the lane swap debuff by shortening the time frame and reducing the overall penalty. We hope to have the best of both worlds for pro and regular play alike. So we'll talk about the changes, but let's just say this, right? The problem with this mechanic is that, one, it's a super toxic mechanic to have in the game because you can't see it. So there's not a clear enough indicator, I think, especially for lower ranked players and people who aren't reading the patch notes. Implementing this weird circle around a lane that you can't see until you get into it is just too visually unclear for a game like League that prides itself on visual clarity. It just doesn't make any sense, right? And so I hate the mechanic for how unclear it is for that reason, even though I understood it, I read it. And the other problem is that it has a lot of implications. So it's even worse than I had initially thought, because I was speculating when this was implemented that there were going to be situations where you'd accidentally, unfortunately, trigger this. Like, for example, if your mid laner had to leave mid lane, maybe was being chased by a gank, and ended up running into the river towards their jungler and their top laner instead of towards the turret, if the mid laner runs away from mid lane and gets too close to top lane, all of a sudden they've triggered the anti-lane swap mechanic. Same thing if a top laner gets forced to run down into the river towards their mid laner. All of a sudden they're triggering the penalty for their mid laner. And so the whole thing is a bit ridiculous because of that. Then I got into game and realized it was even worse. It also means that you're not allowed to roam on support until 3:30 into the game, which was not supposed to be an intended consequence, because this was just supposed to stop lane swapping in pro play, not prevent early roaming from supports. Now, I'm not saying that preventing early roaming from supports is necessarily a bad idea. Maybe it's a unintended consequence is actually a good thing. Maybe people don't want supports roaming that early. If people really don't want supports roaming that early, I'm fine if that's what the direction people want the game to go in. But as a support player who's used to doing that, suddenly finding out that as a negative consequence of the anti-lane swap mechanic, I'm just not able to roam mid off of my first base a lot of times is super annoying, and like a huge impact and change to my gameplay because of this change that was completely unintended. On top of that, there was another situation I ran into with this mechanic where we had a game with a kind of classic solo queue shenanigans level 1, and we ended up, crossing through mid lane and leaving from the top side to get back to bot lane, and it was 1:30 into the game because, well, that happens, right? That's about when the minions are like arriving in mid lane or whatever. So if you're still passing through mid lane after a long shenanigans level 1, unfortunately, you've just triggered the anti-lane swap mechanic and screwed your mid laner right at the start of the game. So that was not a nice experience either, and that happened literally my first game with this turned on. So I noticed already, and these changes have been implemented for a while, it seems like actually they hotfixed it, but the start time is being pushed back from 1:30 to 1:35. Hopefully that 5-second buffer will again allow for some level 1 shenanigans to occur and pass through mid lane without affecting the mid laner. And the end time in top lane is going from 3:30 to 3 minutes, and the end time in mid lane is going down to 2:15. This makes a whole lot of sense because the lane swapping was never really happening in mid lane. It was almost always happening in top lane. So it makes sense to keep the time on for top lane. And by reducing the mid lane time to 2:15, let's say you ran into bot lane and immediately fought and recalled, or you immediately died. This is pretty much going to allow you to roam into mid lane right after your first back instantly. As a support, you're going to be able to do that. The end time in top lane being 3 minutes is still totally fine, because you're usually, if you're, roaming that early, you're not going to go top lane anyways. One other negative consequence that I still see here, though, that I think is rather disappointing, is it used to be a kind of cheesy strategy, but a high risk, high reward strategy for a support player to literally camp a bush in top lane or camp behind the wall in mid lane and then gank their mid laner level 1 or gank their top laner level 1, especially if you happen to be stuck there anyways because of, invade or a lot of skirmishing level 1 or something like that, like we talked about. Sometimes you would opt after the shenanigans level 1, if you're going to be late to bot lane anyways, to just gank top or gank mid as a support right away level 1. That is not viable anymore, and it is still permanently not viable even with these changes, because obviously that would occur before before 2:15 and before 3 minutes. So unfortunately, that strategy for supports is also removed from the game. And again, maybe Riot wants to keep it that way. Maybe Riot doesn't want these highly volatile lanes that are maybe unfun for the person it's happening to, where all of a sudden the support's impacting their lane level 1. I'm just saying that from a support player's perspective, there's like literally multiple plays and strategies, from early roaming top to early roaming mid to like long extended level 1 fights to like ganking mid or top level 1, that are just completely non-viable now because of these changes. And I don't, since this was just meant to remove lane swapping, I really don't know that this was the best way to do it. Obviously, you can prevent lane swapping by just doing some heavy fortification on turrets and specific turrets and stuff like that. So I don't really know that any of this was necessary, especially since the mechanic in general is, again, just a bad, like low clarity mechanic that most low elo players will never understand and accidentally mess up for each other. It's terrible. But these changes definitely help. The minion gold and XP penalty is dropping from 50% to 25%. Again, this makes sense, right? Like people were, whether it was a 25% penalty, in pro play, you're still not going to lane swap if it's a 25% penalty on gold and XP. So, it didn't need to be all the way at 50%. That's basically just extra punishing players in solo queue when this goes off. So this is a good change as well. But again, a lot of strategies limited by this, and I think it's a terrible mechanic that should be removed completely, and they should figure out how to prevent lane swapping a different way, no matter what. I also think that pro play is like really, really dead right now. And so to make such a huge sacrifice for something that is like so not popular anymore, I think doing this to all the league games, casual league games and ranked games and stuff like that is ridiculous for pro play. This is like the most invasive change that has ever been made because of pro play in like maybe the history of league, actually. So I really hate this change. Bounties, gold lead detection time from 14 minutes to 6 minutes. So objective bounty timing unchanged at 14 minutes. I'll have to read what this says because I don't really understand what the point would be of it detecting which team has a gold lead if it's not implementing the objective bounties until 14 minutes. Bounty suppression by lead severity, 0 to 100% to 30 to 100%. Okay. We're taking another big swing of tuning pass on champion bounty suppression. First, we're decoupling the time it can turn on from the objective bounty system in the back end. So this is champion bounties. They didn't even say it, just says bounties. So this is champion bounties are decoupling it from the objective bounty system. I didn't even know that they were. So we can now start suppressing champion bounties whenever we want. We're choosing 6 minutes for this first version, which should give some time for 1v1 laning comebacks, while still turning it on in time for early to mid-game team fights. So I see what they're basically saying is that champion bounties were being suppressed based on, if your team was winning by a lot, for example, or if your team was losing by a lot, then any champion bounty that you might have had would be severely reduced. But that wasn't happening until 14 minutes when objective bounties could turn on. And now they're decoupling it so that objective bounties still turn on at 14 minutes if it's needed, but it can start suppressing champion bounties if your team is behind starting at 6 minutes. So this is yet another change that's going to make it easier to come back in a game if your team is behind by reducing your champion bounty early if you're doing well. So this is yet another change that's going to make it kind of easier to 1v9, easier to carry a game if you would otherwise have a bounty very early, but the rest of your team is doing poorly. So in some ways, that's a nice change for being able to carry a little bit more. But on the other hand, it's a little bit annoying if you're the winning team because, as I've been talking about over and over again in these patch notes, Riot keeps changing the game in ways that make getting a lead less and less meaningful and less impactful. And so when you're winning, right, this is going to make it so that if you're the winning team, it's a nerf to the winning team. but it is a buff to a champion or player who's ahead on the losing team. So make of that what you will. League has always been a game where the winning team has a huge benefit and gets rewarded for playing aggressively early, getting ahead early, and creating advantages for themselves. And I feel like the game keeps moving more and more away from that, where like the game keeps getting even and more even and more even and more even, where like the losing team is afforded so much in terms of bounty suppression and comeback gold and objective bounties and champion bounties and stuff like that. There's so much going on, like XP rebounding in the jungle, just all kinds of shenanigans afforded to the losing team, who deserves to lose because they're behind. We overshot with the tower dive adjustments to Otacon's form selection. So this patch, we're readjusting the calculation so Voracious can actually exist in games for solo queue players. Yeah, I figured they messed this up because I've never seen Voracious in a long time. Increased Otacon form thresholds by about 10%. So you'll see the GA Otacon more often than solo queue. And then they've got like arena changes, swift play changes, mythic shop stuff. So that's pretty much it. And then you got your skins. I've been, talking about these skins for a while. Again, a whole patch, 2 weeks, 3 skins released. Absolutely crazy. On the other hand, at least they're much more, colorful compared to the ones before, but that's a personal preference, right? A lot of people like the darker ones as well. But it's good that they're doing a mix. Again, all the same skin theme line. I will keep updating this, right, as we go through. Normally, I wouldn't care to look at this, but since we made the video about Riot, kind of trolling with skins compared to the past, I felt the need to comment on this. Apparently, next patch, I've heard the skins are going to be very, very good, because I saw somebody on PBE, and there was a BMO skin, a BTMO skin that was very, very good. And there is a Braum skin coming on the next patch that is also extremely good, as well as all of the other ones coming on the next patch. It was like a barbecue Braum or something like that. And there's like going to be a couple of other champions along the same kind of spring, summer theme line that are going to come out that are going to be quite good. Kind of all, I think it was like a Sandcastle. I'm not even sure what champion it was. Maybe Sandcastle Zac or something like that. Just a lot of really good fun skins that are coming out that are kind of unique and not all attached to one skin line. So I think we're going to make a video about them improving once we see the skins from the next patch, but for now it is what it is. So that's it for the patch. With that being said, good luck in solo queue and have a wonderful day.